Are the Lakers going in the right direction? Who are the free agents they realistically have a chance at getting? Can the fans stay with them long enough to get back to winning time? The only question left is, say it with me, you win? Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown Podcast. Today I am excited to bring on friend of the Breakdown, Matt Belinsky, who is also an upstanding member of NBA Twitter and a resident expert on Lakers fandom, as well as maybe a few even insider tidbits on the Lakers we're going to get for him. So, Matt, thanks for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Coach Nick. It's been a while.
It has been. It's been too long. Maybe one day we'll actually hang out in LA in the in IRL.
Yeah, the elusive in real life. Absolutely, we'll make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, let's break it down. You're going to drive today. Let's talk about the Lakers and what is going on in the state of Lakerdom these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot going on, right? Because, aside from being the Lakers, they've taken an interesting trajectory this season. Particularly, let's call it from the middle third on of the season. And, they're lined up to be at the crossroads of a lot of interesting storylines this coming off season. And it always seems, it could be kind of relevancy bias here, but it always seems that, a lot of the basketball Twitter conversations are being, driven by Lakers fans and checking in on their pulse and just, seeing what people are talking about. And that it's been a while since we've really felt anything. And that's kind of the message I'm getting from other members of the Laker fan community. It's like, oh my God, it feels so good to finally care about these games again. And, we understand that the playoffs are out of reach. Can't necessarily say we're playing for anything tangible, but it's been an interesting dynamic to see to lose a little sleep over the results of the Lakers for the first time in quite some time.
For sure. Well, I just did a video not too long ago that was, the title was centered on Lonzo, but it really covered all the Lakers and how well they've been playing in a very sneaky way. I feel like maybe people weren't really aware that they were winning a ton of games. Even in the last 20, it's leveled off a little bit. They're 12-8 in the last 20. But that is such a far cry from where we've been with the Lakers in the last, has it been 4 years now of a lot of losing?
Pretty much. And just the tenor of it regardless. I'm thinking back to 2011, 2012, and then 12-13. And, you're coming off a disappointing end in 2011 when we came in with a pretty strong team and were expected to make the finals at the very least again. Who knows if we're going to beat the Heat and, their first season together. But, it was a sour ending to 2011. You go into the lockout season, you get hit with basketball reasons, and that kind of sours that entire season. Mm-hmm. You get a burst of excitement and enthusiasm from the Howard signing and the Nash trade, and then it's just a disaster from day one. And even though an interesting Kobe offensive season, at least in 2012-13, salvages it a bit until the injury, even that season was a little bit sour. So, it's been a while. It's really, we reached the about as high as you're going to get as a sports fan with that, Game 7 2010. But we're going on, 6-7 years since we really had something to feel good about. And it's been interesting because, you wanted to temper expectations with a rookie point guard, and you have some interesting young talent, but, everyone was really, pointing towards the offseason and just tempering their expectations. And we're, if we want to talk insider specs, some pretty credible sources told me that, the Pelinkas, the Magics of the world, that they expected to make the playoffs this year. And that, while obviously that they were shedding salary and reorganizing things for the future with the Lopez-Russell trade, that, bringing on Brook, bringing on KCP, and having someone like Lonzo, who even is inexperienced, could be a transformational player. They were expecting to make the playoffs, and that comes from coming from a cynical fan, from the perspective of a cynical fan such as myself, and that seemed completely crazy, and I'm sure it seemed completely crazy to most other observers out there. But then you take a look at what's happened, and over the past, let's call it 30 games. A lot of injuries, both to some established veterans and a couple members of the core, trading out Clarkson and Nance, who are two very productive players. And you could even say were underrated players in the grand scheme of things. That their results have been pretty impressive. And I guess the question at this point is like, what can you take away?
Well, can I light Kobe up for a minute? Since we're talking about Kobe and we're talking about that era of the D'Antoni, because I was just talking about this the other day. Dwight Howard comes, and it's pretty clear to me, and you probably agree, Kobe has no say over whether Dwight comes or is not. He's on the team, right? And that's how it is, right? Kobe didn't know. So here's my take. Obviously, Kobe didn't like the way Dwight Howard prepared, didn't like the way he practiced, didn't like the way, I guess, probably either played, didn't like he didn't play hard enough. And he kind of sort of took it upon himself. I felt like he was going to educate him to some degree in like how this is supposed to be done. When in reality, it's like, here's the guy you have. This is the team you have. You need to figure out how to make that work rather than somehow simply expect someone else to completely and radically change, way deep into their careers. And I think that was an interesting fundamental, approach that Kobe probably will never be able to take, right? He simply needs you to bend all the way to what he expects has to happen, or else it's not going to work.
Sure, that was definitely at play, but I think there was one variable that accentuated that, and that was the fact that Dwight Howard was not at 100%. I mean, he probably wasn't even at 60%. If you go back and look at media from the 2000 going into 2012 offseason, Dwight was not expected back till December. I mean, that was an article of faith when the trade happened. Bernie Bickerstaff, during his short interim turn as coach, even let the cat out of the bag. He was giving an answer to a reporter, and he was trying to sugarcoat why the team was underperforming. And he said, well, we're even ahead of schedule because we didn't think Dwight was going to be back till December. You add that to, a contact of mine who had been on Dwight's marketing team told me, maybe after the second or third preseason game, ran into them at breakfast, and they told me that I don't know why Dwight's playing right now. It takes him 15 minutes to get out of bed in the morning. And I didn't believe that could be true. Why would the organization, that's just bad player management. That's bad asset management. That's just not a sound medical approach. And then you go watch him on the court those first few games in 2012. And believe it or not, I remember it was game one. This is Dwight Howard, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. And Elton Brand, who was coming to the end of his road, goes around Dwight like his feet were stapled to the ground. And after that, I was like, okay, hold up. Something's not right here. And so if you had superhuman freak athlete 2010, 2011 Dwight Howard doing whatever he was capable of doing, the clash of personalities all of a sudden, doesn't become such a big issue. If he was really, you go back and look at Kobe, during that season, and he carried an enormous offensive load, did some incredible things, but people understate just how badly he was on defense. He was a statue.
Right.
Okay. So if you've got Dwight there pretty much mopping up all Kobe's mistakes on the defensive end and dominating, all of a sudden, this becomes a manageable, the personality gap becomes manageable. Just like, listen, Paul Gasol was not exactly a Kobe Bryant type. But because he was skilled, because he was capable, they were able to bridge that gap, and Pau got on board. So,
right. Well, you could probably argue that because of the championships, that kind of gave Pau, and maybe rightfully so, some extra cachet with Kobe, even though you could argue that it was Bynum who did a lot of that hard work on the defensive end to cover.
Sure.
And by the way, Dwight Howard's numbers in that year, he played 76 games, scored 17 a game, 12.4 rebounds, 2.4 blocks. He was still, some reasonable version of himself. And to know that Kobe probably, why was he getting out of bed and playing when he was completely broken down? Right? It's probably because Kobe, the Kobe influence, right? He sort of had no other choice the way that culture was set up. Is that fair?
I think it's reasonable. I do think that in that circumstance, with Dwight coming off back surgery of of that scope, that they could have held him out. And it was definitely, I can remember the eye test. You would watch him play and you're like, listen, if this is the most effort that this guy can expend on the court, he shouldn't be on the court. And it speaks to how good he was and how commanding a presence he was, that he was able to still be relatively productive. But through the first 2 to 3 months of that season, there's a very good argument to be made that he should not have been on the court. And then it was just a domino effect, because you think, okay, had they held him out, had you had a serviceable Steve Nash, you would have been able to, that team would have been able to keep their heads above water. But then looking back on it, listen, if you're starting Chris Duhon, you have no Dwight, you have Pau Gasol on, knees with two semi-arthritic knees at that point. They had to hold him out for a couple weeks, I remember. Did you really want to hold Dwight Howard out? And then the Lakers end up, going, they're 12 games under 500 and the playoffs are inescapable. So, I mean, it was just the snake bitten from start to finish. And then, I mean, we could get into, their performance during a similar phase as the Lakers team's this season's performance from just before the midway point of the season towards the end of the season, where they were actually pretty good. They had a top 5, top 6 record. They weren't unfortunately able to test out, the sustainability of that in the playoffs because of Kobe's injury. But at that season, in retrospect, you just got to throw your hands up at.
And another thing you can throw your hands up at is the fact that 66% of men lose their hair by age 35. Have you started putting sunscreen on the top of your head? Does it take one rub of the towel to dry your hair after a shower? You've got to act now if you want to maintain those silky smooth locks. And the way to do it is with 4hims.com. They connect you with real doctors and medical solutions to treat your hair loss. It's really easy, and you don't have to have that awkward scene in the doctor's office where they have you bend over and cough. Well, that's the wrong ailment, but you get the picture. There are so many weird solutions guys turn to when they just need to go to 4hims.com, a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, sexual wellness for men. So head over to 4hims.com. That's FORHIMS.com. Answer a few questions, and their doctors will review and get you what you need to stop that hair loss. Get a month of Hims for just $5 when you go to my special URL, 4hims.com/CoachNick. You'll save hundreds of dollars compared to a doctor or pharmacy. So type in 4hims.com/CoachNick and keep that hair where it belongs, out of your ears and nose and back on the top of your head. We had gotten through the Byron Scott years and the shepherding of the Kobe end of his career thing. And which we don't need to, we talked about that ad nauseum. So we get to Luke Walton, who instantly, well, I don't want to say instantly, but certainly the last year Byron Scott, 17 wins, and then he juices it to 26 last year. And now this year they're at 31, and they're on pace to get, I don't even know, about like 37, 38 wins. So another big 12, 13 win, jump over year to year. So, yeah, and by the way, like you're right, like I could almost understand why they think, okay, we could probably compete for that 8th spot in the playoffs this year, and had it now. So tell us what happened in like sort of the middle of the year that led them, because I think that they started out pretty well, if I'm not mistaken, this year, but they must have had like a stretch there for about 20 games where they were pretty bad.
Yeah, so it's a couple interesting dynamics at play. One is that they've been remarkably better on defense than anyone anticipated, right? I mean, the first 10, 15 games, I mean, they were top 6 defense.
Yeah.
No one saw that coming. And while that's tailed off a little bit, I think what do they have? Maybe a 15-spot jump in defensive rating this year. And, that's with integrating a rookie point guard. But then as it turns out, Lonzo is, perhaps his most valuable quality is his defense, and very few people saw that coming. Brook Lopez, not exactly known as a staunch rim protector. Same thing with Randle, that some of his physical limitations, his wingspan and jumping ability, have made him up to at least until this year not really a plus defender. So they've been strong defensively the entire year, and I think people may be underselling. I was going to be happy if they were a top 20 defense. So them coming in, 11, 12, 13 within shouting distance of 10, that bodes very well. So you've got that, and then one of the factors at play that does kind of give me a little concern in terms of the future is that a lot of the damage being done the last month or so is being done by guys who are really not in the long-term plan. People have not been talking about how good Brook Lopez has been. Brook he started off the season slow, had a little injury problem there for a minute or two. He's been a pretty unstoppable offensive weapon for about 6 weeks now, and particularly in the type of offense, because the issue with Lonzo is he's not able to At this point, he's too gun shy to really take the ball to the hoop strongly. He's not a good free throw shooter. So he's turning the corner on defenders or coming off a pick and roll, and he's looking at he's going 90% pass, 10% shoot.
Right.
And so you got to have, you need screeners and you need roll guys who can hit a shot. And if you're looking for a big guy who can set a screen and then still roll off the screen and be a threat from three, I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the past month or so I've seen Lonzo take 3-4 dribbles towards the paint. Lopez, fades back to the three-point line. Lonzo throws, what looks like a sloppy pass over his head, and Brook Lopez drains a three. Not, you don't have that many guys out there who can do that, even in today's NBA. So, having that factor and having that factor and that weapon in their arsenal offensively is covering up, for a lot of other deficiencies.
How concerned are you with a guy who's traditionally in his career been like one of the worst rebounders for that position of all time? So what do you make? He's averaging under 4 rebounds per game right now.
Sure.
And let me see here. He's playing. It just jumped on me here. Here he is. He's playing. He's not playing a lot of minutes. He's only playing about 22.7 minutes. So per 36, for instance, just to give you a better example of what that is, he's still only getting 6 rebounds. So what do we make of that, and how does that fit into their long-term plans?
Sure. It's concerning. And, yes, you're certainly wondering if Lopez is, he fills up the stat. He can fill up the bucket, but he can't do much else. I mean, I've been trying to monitor him and watch him on defense. It feels like he's better than people give him credit for. Okay. He's obviously a subpar pick and roll defender, but the Lakers have been running a drop back scheme. They've been icing most of the pick and rolls. He seems to be moving pretty well and using his height relatively well. And, with the amount of minutes he has been getting, which I think, have been exceeded his season average over the past 6 weeks or so, their defense has been maintaining pretty strongly. And also, much like, keeping, and we'll get to this, we'll take this in another direction in a second, but playing Randle and Lopez next to each other has been a real boon. And much like Lopez's ability to stretch the floor opens things up for Randle. Randle's kind of battering ram, hitting the glass approach also kind of, seems to cover up some of Brook's deficiencies on, as a rebounder. And then you look at, I think Ingram's had been rebounding pretty well. Lonzo's, an exceedingly good rebounder as a point guard. So, I mean, hey, if I'm thinking, all right, who do I want to man the center position for the Lakers over the next, 4 or 5 years as the rest of the core develops, Lopez is not my first choice. But, if there was some scenario where, okay, we signed Paul George, we have a mid-level exception, we're able to get Brook for a relatively cheap price because nobody else has cap space this offseason. I could think of worse options than giving him a couple more years and seeing where this thing goes.
Right, fair enough. I hear you. And by the way, I've identified the issue we found in there in the middle of the year. Why or what went wrong so much or so quickly was, in November they go on a 1, 2, 3. They have a 5-game losing streak. Then they win 2. Then they lose another 3. They win 1, and they lose 8 in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in a row. So there's a stretch of of I don't know what I just said, 17, 18 games where they lost the majority of those. Can you think back at that time around so it's November 22nd, they lose to the Kings, and then they don't get out of that losing streak until they beat the Hawks in January 7th.
Sure. I think it was a couple issues. One was just strength of schedule. They just ran, they came out of the gates with a relatively easy schedule, a lot of home games, and then they just ran into a stretch of tough games on the road. And then, Lonzo kind of going from threatening to set records for futility and field goal percentage to becoming a relatively serviceable shooter, even though he's cooled off over the last few games. I think he hadn't come out of that rut yet. Ingram, has progressed nicely over the course of the season, but he really took off after that stretch. So I don't know, listen, look, what are you looking for out of a young team? You're looking for progress. You're looking for evolution. Lonzo's progressed. Ingram looks great. Another issue is, another factor here was Josh Hart. Much like Lonzo, Josh seemed to have the yips early on in the season, that his shooting capabilities just did not match even a pessimistic view of based on what he had displayed as a collegiate player, and that Josh couldn't hit anything. So I think Lonzo was injured a little bit. Hart got some run. He got comfortable. he all of a sudden becomes a productive player. So that's also helped. And it's also been a little surprising, much with him and Ingram going down right about the same time, how sturdy the Lakers have held up over the past couple of weeks. So I think it was a lot of factors that you'll just see from a young team combined with the strength of schedule. And I'm hoping that the play over the last 6 to 8 weeks isn't fool's gold, but with Brook being this productive offensively, and KCP out of nowhere, I think has been hitting 41% from three. And that's one item I was discussing a lot earlier in the year is Lonzo with a dead-eye shooter at the 2 guard. That opens up a lot of options for him, and that's I didn't think KCP was that, but he has been that dead-eye shooter over the past month to 6 weeks, and that has been a real boon. So it concerns me a little bit that if you obviously, hey, if we go and grab Paul George or LeBron, obviously these become non-issues. But you got a couple guys who have been very key factors in the Lakers' resurgence, and they might not be in the long-term plans.
Right. I've been waiting for KCP for years to suddenly figure it out. He's got a nice looking jump shot. I would have assumed 40% would not have been an issue for him. And you're right. Over the last 20 games, he's shooting 44%. I know it was even higher when I did my video. So so there's a guy that I don't know. The sample size probably isn't big enough to simply say yes, he is the guy that they want to play alongside Lonzo. But you also can't overlook. And again, Lonzo should get a lot of credit. I really think he's a great player. He's going to be even better as he progresses. But he really hasn't played that much, right?
Yeah.
So even the last 20 games, he's played 11 of those. Mm-hmm. So it's look, KCP is doing so much better because Ball is giving him the ball. But you know what? It's like half of the games he's still shooting well without Ball in there, it looks like.
Sure. No, they perform very well. I mean, the team performed very well. And the offense looked great while Josh Hart was running point there for a while, which bodes very well for the future. I mean, you have a couple people who I was trying to temper my excitement over I don't watch much college. I saw maybe 5 minutes of Josh Hart, but when he fell to the Lakers in the draft, I had a couple very shrewd, astute observers who were pretty high on that pick. And from what we've seen so far from Josh Hart this season, I mean, it seems like they got a real steal and getting if someone who could be potentially an elite combo, third guard, not an all-star, but okay, if Josh Hart is your third guard who can play both the point guard and the shooting guard position off the bench, I mean, that's a nice piece to have as your 6th, 7th guy.
Oh, yeah, and I got roasted when I did a video. I mean, okay, maybe some hyperbole, but why the Lakers were the best front office in the league. And there was a little context because, again, they switched the front office, right? It's a new one this year anyway. But sure. Maybe it should have been why they're the best scouting in the NBA or something, because I don't think a team has nailed picks as well as they have over the last several years. And it's the Josh Harts, who I love Josh Hart, really a revelation to me. It's the Larry Nances, who are not there anymore. But those are the great shots. I mean, heck, Alex Caruso, right? There are moments when you're like, gee, this kid can play too.
Oh, he looks like a rotation player. Even more recently, Travis Ware. You take a look at him like, okay, hey, he's a 10-day contract G League guy, but I think if in the modern NBA, you could do worse than having this guy as your ninth, your ninth guy in your rotation. People are still, it's early and he's a project, but high on this guy Thomas Bryant, who's tearing up the G League, and I saw him. I'm think some of my calls from Lakers Summer League based on some of these rookies the last couple of years have been pretty solid. And I took a look at him. I was like, wow, a guy that tall who can shoot like that, if he can round out his game, this guy could potentially play. And the Lakers scouting department has really knocked it out of the park over the last 4 years at this point. And that also bodes well for them, having been able to, snag a pick, and who knows what their intentions are with that pick that they got from Cleveland. But if they end up keeping it and choosing 21 to 23, hey, the likelihood of them being able to grab another, young piece or young potential rotation player pretty high.
And by the way, as we are moving, toward the end of the year, that pick it's their first round pick in 2018, right?
Yeah.
So, we don't know where the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to end up. They don't care necessarily probably what seed they get, but, they could drop, sort of in that, lower than that. It could be a 20th pick the way we're going here, I think. Let's see here.
They're so, that the third and fourth teams in the East and a handful of teams in the West are so tightly packed record-wise at this point. I think it's like, something like maybe 2 games in the loss column away from being the 19th or 20th pick. And hey, I mean, we've seen over the past few years how highly those picks of that caliber are valued, and being able to get that in the scenario, that the Lakers did when they were shedding salary that they needed to shed, could turn out to be a good deal.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see. That's why you can't rush to judgment on those deals too much. But I wasn't that excited because I really feel like, well, they helped the Cavaliers pretty greatly. They needed that, although it's kind of evened out now with their performances over there. But I always liked Nance, and I always thought he would be like, even on let's just say on a title team, he would be a great like second big off the bench. With the energy and whatever. And eventually, I suppose he could still develop a better offensive game, too. So that's the guy you want on your team, setting good screens, getting rebounds, blocking shots. So we'll have to see what happens with him in Cleveland. But that was the one guy I thought that it would have been worth keeping. But you know what? It's unlocked Randle a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And, let's be honest, there's a logjam there, right? I mean, you've got Kuzma essentially playing the same position. Kuzma's a guy who likes having the ball. He deserves to have the ball. I mean, looking longer term, the Lakers are pretty adamant that Brandon Ingram is a 3, but I mean, length and height wise, could qualify as a 4. Randle kicking it into 6th gear has definitely kind of washed away some of the sins of losing Nance. So it doesn't seem to have hurt the team too much overall. I mean, more from just a philosophical standpoint, I just don't love what's the point of nailing draft picks if you keep on having to give them away? Yeah. And I understand, that they needed to in this particular circumstance, but, kind of taking that philosophy, into the offseason with whether or not they are going to sign Randle. I mean, hey, I'm not going to be mad if the Lakers sign LeBron and Paul George. I obviously am going to consider that a positive, but if you're losing Julius Randle, and that you're starting to lose, you can't keep on nailing draft picks and then losing the guys for pretty much nothing. Like that's with the way that the modern NBA and the CBA is structured. If you nail draft picks, you got to be able to keep your guys. I mean, the league is positioned for that to be of higher value. So, I don't love nailing a mid-40s pick on Jordan Clarkson. I'm sorry, for whatever you think of Jordan Clarkson, they got incredible value out of a pick in the 40s for him. Same with Nance. He's a great role player in the late 20s. And, I think it can all be justified based on, and don't get me started because this podcast will go 6 hours, but in having to unfortunately shed assets to deal with the fallout from the Deng and Mozgov contracts, I understand they could justify the trade and letting them go. But if you add Randle to that, it doesn't sit well with me to keep on having good young guys that you have contractual advantages to sign that you keep on having to give away.
Sure. And let's just talk about Randle for a second, because in the last 15 games, he's averaging 21.9 points, 9.7 rebounds, shooting 61.1% from the field. Doesn't take threes, but he's shooting from the field, astronomically. He's a double-double machine, which is we always kind of felt like he could do, and had shown plenty of evidence over the past several years since he started that that's what he could do. So, I mean, is this the kind of guy that could be a starter on a title team?
I think he's absolutely proven he's starter on a title team caliber. I think it will, if he keeps working and stays on this trajectory, then you start getting into, borderline all-star territory. And I don't think that's unreasonable to project for him at this point. I mean, he's a tough one to analyze because of his aesthetics, right? And it's something that, my buddy Ethan Strauss always mentioned about Dwight Howard back in the day, is that his post moves were herky-jerky, but people always said he had none because it looked odd. But the ball, towards maybe his 4th, 5th season, the ball started going in the hoop, like before he had the injury and his career took a downturn. But Randle was one of these guys who, a year ago, you could have projected him as the rich man's Kwame Brown, as a guy who has just an elite combination of size, speed, and strength, but doesn't have the coordination, looks awkward, and the ball just keeps on clanging off the rim. And to a certain extent, what seemed to change is that the ball started just going in the hoop. That a guy who's awkward and herky-jerky like that, at this point I don't really care how smooth it looks, because the ball's going into the hoop at the rate of its 61% true shooting percentage. And at that point, you're not getting any points for style. So, he's found a way to utilize those physical skills to get the ball to go into the hoop, even, and even if he is taking the ball up in a lot of congestion, even if he still doesn't have a reliable outside shot. But, he made the progress I needed to see out of him this year. He's still only 23. He's got a few defensive deficiencies, but he is making use once again of that speed and that strength, and is a great switching option. Not great on closing out on shooters, not as good in the post as you'd expect out of a guy that's strong. But what are you looking for? You're looking to see if a guy is a worker, and there's always the risk that he gets paid and stops working. But that's a risk that you kind of have to bake into the cake with any player based on how the rookie contract scale is structured. So I think he's worth the bet. I mean, it's really going to be fascinating because you've got a guy who may not get market value, what you think may be market value, because of the particulars of who's got cap space this offseason. And it's like the Laker fans are sitting here with this time bomb of pretty much just Dallas as the option to lay a big offer sheet on Randle. And, oh, God, the Lakers got to go make that decision at that point. But other than that, and not that many people, not maybe 2 or 3 teams at most that he makes sense for. Right. So I think, at 18 million, I start to get queasy about him. But even at 16, maybe. But anything 14 or below, I think you have to keep him. It's not discretionary. If you can get him for 14 million a year or less, you have to keep Julius Randle.
So remind me, what's his status right now? Is he a restricted free agent?
He's restricted, yes.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. Now, if they want to pay him 14 and he wants to take 14, is that enough room for them to sign LeBron and Paul George?
Yeah, I think you need to do make one other move of that, somewhat feasible. Eric Pincus has written about this a lot and done a great job, but it's you've also got the timing factor because it's all a matter of can you get a commitment from LeBron within the signing period for Julius Randle. So if someone drops the offer sheet on him day 1 and LeBron wants to wait till day 7 to make his decision, you might have to sacrifice Randle for that. I would not. I mean, if you lose him and whiff on LeBron, that is going to I'm going to be sour about that, and I think a lot of other Laker fans are for a long time. Not to get into, I wouldn't even call it maybe conspiracy theory, maybe overstating it, but Randle and Paul George share an agent. There have been a lot of rumblings from, other very, credible observers that the Lakers have been, if you want to talk about tampering, that the Lakers have been in more contact with interested parties in the Paul George LeBron sweepstakes than might be kosher. And who knows what the lines of communication are between the various camps, that who knows, this could be coordinated properly. Or who knows, hopefully nobody thinks that Julius Randle's worth 18 mil a year. The Lakers are able to hold on. Nobody sends it. He doesn't sign an offer sheet because there's nothing that overwhelming, and they're able to wait it out and sign him for 12 to 14 after, seeing what Paul George and LeBron decide to do.
What do you make of LeBron supposedly walking around Philadelphia looking at schools?
Well, I've heard enough rumbling. I've heard enough commentary about what LeBron's LA activities are supposedly how you're supposed to interpret that. I've got enough texts of LeBron spottings at Equinox Sepulveda, Philadelphia. That's an interesting one. I think there's a strong case to be made for them. I still think there is one factor here, and that Philadelphia is going to the playoffs this year. Embiid, Simmons, Dario Saric, they're getting playoff experience, and I think that's an underrated factor here. My concern with LeBron is he comes here, you get 1 year, sure, you see Ingram grow, you see Lonzo grow, Kuzma's playing well. LeBron's going to take these guys into their first playoffs ever. So you get, Lonzo shitting the bed, Ingram shitting the bed in their first playoffs. You get after LeBron's first season, is he still going to be happy and sit there waiting around for season 2 to see if they nurture and if they're a little more prepared for the playoffs? That's definitely a concern. So if you get a good playoff performance this year out of Embiid, Simmons, and the rest of the Philadelphia core, if you're comparing young teams with young cores. Not only are, let's just be honest, Philadelphia's theirs are probably better, but they're also a little more seasoned.
Yeah, well, and it's also an injury issue over in Philly too. We just don't know how they're going to hold up. But I guess I always just sort of assume they're going to be healthy. They've overcome whatever they have, and that's how it's going to be. So it's going to be an interesting battle over the summer. I mean, my take has always been that LeBron has no business going to the West. I don't know why he'd ever want to do that. But what about this? Do you have any other little insider birdies whispering in your ear about anything interesting stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the Lakers, it's after the front office turmoil of the last few years that the Lakers are really trying to read fans trying to read the tea leaves. Like, the Magic decisions seem to be made for some really good reasons, some reasons that kind of stink of, the Lakers' exceptionalism and trying to relive the glory days and like what's the interplay between Pelinka and Magic. And there's some things that I hear that are reason for concern. We all love Magic. We all think he's a shrewd business executive. We sometimes question his basketball acumen and rating talent, but I've definitely heard from a few different people that as opposed to the Dodgers, where he's essentially said, okay, I'm the face and I'm the communicator and the marketer, but I'm going to leave the on the field decisions and the personnel decisions to the experts, that he might be butting in a little bit more here. I can tell you one thing that I've heard from over half a dozen people that are knowledgeable in the situation. Neither the league nor the players are thrilled with the decision that they made about their trainer. You've got Gunnar Peterson. He is, if you grew up in LA in the 80s, you may have heard of Gunnar Peterson because he was the first celebrity trainer. He is not a, particularly well-regarded person in the sport, in the athletic community. I mean, he mostly trains, he trains the Kardashians. He trains Sylvester Stallone. So there are a couple moves that gave a lot of Laker fans, or at least knowledgeable ones, a little pause. Like, listen, are we making decisions from the right place here? So there's definitely some concern that Magic is steering the ship. If you're thinking you're comfortable at him steering at 60% with Pelinka at 40, that maybe it's more like 80-20, and they're making some other organizational moves. With the wrong priorities and the wrong assumptions. Definitely hearing some people say that. I heard, listen to Jeannie Buss's podcast with Howard Beck the other week. I was very happy with how she framed things and understand, and how she explained how, the inner workings of the front office these days. So it's still wait and see, but that one in particular with the trainer, that's kind of perked people's ears up in terms of the Lakers maybe repeating past mistakes. And also, it's the question of, okay, do they have a plan B, or are they just completely all in on LeBron for the summer? I'm concerned, and there are some people chirping that they're a little too all in on LeBron. It seems like Pelinka's too shrewd to not have a plan B, but I don't know how comfortable everyone is with banking, the next 5 years of the franchise on a 33, 34-year-old player who said, and everyone forgets, LeBron has publicly stated, he said, this is my last stop when he came back to Cleveland, that he's going to move on to greener pastures and he's going to come to LA. So, those are some of the concerns. I'm going to withhold judgment for the moment, and we'll see how things play out this summer.
Absolutely. Well, with that great breakdown and great insight into what's going on over in the Lakers. I'm curious, it's actually interesting to think that the 80-20 you said was in favor of Magic?
Yeah.
Wow. So you think that Magic has more sway and more power than Pelinka?
You need context, and it would depend on the scenario.
Okay.
But, so let's think about it in terms of like Jim Buss and Kupchak. I think it's pretty clear at this point that Kupchak made some decisions that he was if he was alone using his best judgment would not have made, but he had to make them because he knew where his bread was buttered. He knew who hired him. Okay. Similarly, Pelinka knows who hired him. Jeannie Buss did not hire Pelinka. She hired Magic Johnson. So is Pelinka steering the ship day to day? Are there a ton of decisions that he is he is the final authority on? Sure. But when push comes to shove, And I think there is a concern that if Magic has an impulse in one direction and Pelinka gets the feeling that he's not going to be able to change his mind, that he would follow Magic down a path that he doesn't necessarily think is the optimal one.
Interesting. All right, well, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out with the draft and all those different kind of things and free agents and LeBron. So thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was a great time as always.
You got it. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel. We're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Matt?
I'm in.